All right. What is human research? Well, it's obviously about conducting research with or about people. It can be on their data, it can be on their samples. And there's a number of ways that participation in research is used to include, that we use to include human beings through. And that is taking part in surveys, interviews, focus groups, anyone undergoing psychological, physiological or medical testing or treatment, being observed by researchers having access to personal documents or other materials, and the collection and use of their organs, tissues, fluids, that can be blood, skin, urine, biopsy, specimens. There's a whole range of those. Access to their information. This is actually quite an important area, and it's usually described in three ways: and identifiable information, re-identifiable information, non-identifiable information. We'll touch on those later through the presentation. How is human research considered? So the human research is considered by a human research ethics committee, and the ethics committee review is in line with the National Statement on Ethical Conduct in Human Research. It is the Bible for all ethics committees. It is what they base all their decisions on. Any decisions that they make usually is in line. You should be able to find somewhere in the National Statement that either confirms or helps them decide on that, and it really does assist the committee in guiding them through making their decisions. So the National Statement sets out national standards for ethical design, conduct of human research in consultation with communities who participate in design, conduct, fund, manage, and the publication of human research. All right. Composition of an ethics committee. The minimum membership of any HREC is 8 people. So the 8 people are divided into the following categories. And the categories are: there is always one chairperson. There are at least 2 lay people, 1 man and 1 woman, at least 1 pastoral care representative, 1 with professional care, 1 lawyer, and 2 with research experience. That is the minimum. However, the committees are then given the task to appoint as many members in those categories as required. And generally, the additional membership is based on the nature of the research areas that those research committees, on the nature of the research that those research committees tend to work with. So, in a hospital such as Austin Health, you know, the type of research that we don't necessarily see, we don't have a maternity ward here, so we don't generally see any research that involves pregnant women. So, you know, we wouldn't have a gynecologist present on our committee. So it really is based on the expertise required to review research projects. That is how we decide on the broad membership of the committee. The committee are also required to ensure to the best of its ability that they maintain an equal balance of female to male ratios present at any one meeting. And that's actually quite difficult to do, but we do our best to ensure that we can offer that balanced ratio. What are the considerations of the ethics committee? So the role of the ethics committee is to ensure that the design, review and conduct of research reflects these 4 main principles, and they are research merit and integrity, justice, beneficence, and respect for human beings. Just a little bit about what those actual considerations are. So research merit. The potential benefit of the research needs to be justified, and it needs to be done in an appropriate fashion. So research needs to be also based on current literature that supports the aims of the research, and the research is designed to ensure respect for participants is not compromised. Integrity. So integrity means that we need to ensure that the principles are followed and that the research is conducted honestly, and communication of the results of the research, whether they are favourable or unfavourable, are communicated accordingly. Justice. Justice takes into account scope and objectives of the research. It looks at the burden to the participants and how fair access to the benefits of the research is across the board. Beneficence refers to the benefits of the research to participants and the wider community. And in the event that there is no benefit to participants, the risk to the participants must be low. And in actual fact, that's actually a really important point, because there's a number of research projects out there that in actual fact, there is no direct benefit to participants actually participating. They are really there participating for the greater good of medical research. Respect refers to researchers respecting participants' privacy, confidentiality, and cultural sensitivities of the participants. That is my mum hat going on there. So that's really important, and the ethics committee are very whenever decisions are made, those four or five principles always come into play. So that's just a little bit about the ethics committee. So the risk categories. So there are a number of risk categories that we split research into, and the risk categories are high risk research, low or negligible risk, audits, and QI activities. And each of those risk categories require a different review pathway. So I'll touch on that as well a little bit. So high risk research. So high risk research where there is a possibility of harm greater than discomfort. So most clinical interventions, the use of drugs and devices, they always are looked at as high risk research, and all high risk research must be reviewed by a full HREC. So that's a really important point to make. So some high risk research includes physical harm, psychological harm, social harm, economic, legal harm. There's a list. There is some research that borders on low and high, and usually what I encourage researchers to do is always give us a call. We're a friendly bunch, and we can always guide people to the right pathway. So it's just some examples of some of the main high risk harms that you may come across. So the next one is low negligible risk research. So lower negligible risk research does require review by an HREC. Here at Austin Health, our full HREC has appointed a low risk ethics review committee that can review all our low negligible risk research. So they have been empowered to approve that research. So that committee also has a chairperson, and it has a breakdown of those required categories. So low risk research is research in which only the foreseeable risk is one of discomfort. So some of those include, simple staff, student, patient surveys that do not involve any sensitive or invasive questions and do not focus on vulnerable groups. So vulnerable groups would be, we would consider ICU patients to be a vulnerable group, because generally in ICU, these patients are unable to consent for themselves. So we would consider them a vulnerable group. It could be mental health. It might be post-traumatic stress participants. We would consider all those groups vulnerable groups. Focus groups we would consider to be low negligible risk. Assessment of new non-invasive processes, such as a new ward assessment tool. Creation of a database. The use of previously collected non-identifiable biological samples that have been consented to be used for research would be considered low risk, and any linkage of data with external databases we would also consider to be low risk. An audit. An audit is defined as an activity which involves a research question, and that research question involves the analysis of data from previously collected patient information with an intention to publish. Audits are generally retrospective, however, prospective audits can be conducted in certain circumstances. So I guess the thing I want to point out with audits and QI, which I'll go into in the next slide, is that every institution that has an ethics committee attached to it will review audits and QIs differently, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. but certainly audits and QI applications, if they are being conducted in the institution themselves and you are doing them as part of your your general work processes, some of that research actually doesn't need to be reviewed by an ethics committee, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. All right. Quality improvement activity, sometimes also referred to as quality assurance, quality assurance. This process evaluates and assesses to improve health service delivery, to improve patient and population outcomes. It's done in a number of ways, so it can be used with collecting and use of personal and sensitive information for the purpose of funding, management planning, monitoring, and improving or evaluating a health service. Does my audit or QI project need ethics? So it's a very interesting question, and a question that we get asked a lot in the office. And each time, whilst there is information out there, there is a link to it at the bottom there. We do always encourage people to give us a call, because we do decide on a case-by-case basis whether one is required over the other. So there is no, there is no real black and white answer to these questions. So if you're ever in doubt, my advice will be, and you'll hear this throughout our presentation, is refer to the research office. They will guide you along the right pathway with respect to those things. Because what we don't want to see happen is that you undertake a process, you do all the work for it, and then we turn around and say, oh, actually, we think you should have done it an alternative way, which will get you a better outcome. And then you have to go back and redo work. So, we encourage that to happen in the first instance. So does my audit or QI project need ethics? So there are certain triggers that we use in the office when we're looking at and deciding and helping people decide which pathway to undertake. And some of these we've listed here. So I guess it's, is there going to be a secondary use of data? Is there going to be a comparison of cohorts? Is there randomization involved? Some of these questions will trigger you and put you into a different pathway bracket. And I think